So now we're rounding the home stretch. We've looked at coherentism, we've looked at foundationalism, we've found fault with both of the arguments, we've actually extracted a bit of insight from our evaluations, and now we want to take stock. So we can distinguish two general sorts of foundationalism. There's our old epistemic friend, substantive foundationalism. That's just the substantive theory, the substance of a theory about what it is to be justified. And its ontological brother, or its methodological brother, formal foundationalism. Formal foundationalism just says, look, you want a theory that does this. And this would be the view that with respect to some normative or evaluative property, phi, the conditions actual or possible within which phi would apply can be specified in general or perhaps recursively. So that's the form of the theory. That's what you want to accomplish with the theory. Now we can look at three different grades or three different levels of difficulty or levels of accomplishment. The easiest thing to do, the lowest level of accomplishment, is grade 1, mere supervenience of the property of justification upon some non-normative and non-evaluative properties. And essentially, I think what we discover is, even if successful, this is all the regress argument would establish. It says, if there is justification, then the justification has to come from some sort of intrinsically justified belief. What properties justify something intrinsically? Why? We don't say. All we do is say it has to be that way. Otherwise, that can't be justification. Grade 2 ups the ante a bit, tries to accomplish a little bit more. It says, look, we want to explain that supervenience stuff. How is it that a belief can realize justification? We want to add to that goal an ability to specify the conditions actual and possible for belief justification in a way that is explicable or perhaps even recursively applicable, so that we can now say, here are the properties that are responsible for that. So all classes of justification result from some set of specifiable properties. Here are the properties. If you have it, boom. Sounds a lot like the definitional theory of knowledge, the justified true belief theory of knowledge. This sounds like kind of grade 2 supervenience. What is it to know? To have these properties. I'm justified, I'm true, I'm a belief. Why? Got me. Finally, there is grade 3. And grade 3 supervenience or formal foundationalism says, look, I tell how it is that a belief can realize justification, be justified, and in addition to that, I specify or I make claims that the conditions actual or possible for belief justification are specifiable in a simple, comprehensive theory. It's easily explicable supervenience. So in this case, we say, look, I not only tell you that justification can be realized, I not only tell you that justification can be realized if a belief has these properties, I explain to you why those properties are the properties that it would need to have and how they bring about justification. At least that's how it should be. What he actually says seems more superficial. All cases of justification are going to result from some simple set of specifiable natural properties, possibly recursively. That's not quite why they do it or how they do it. So we'll look at coherence and formal foundationalism. Does coherence achieve this goal? Does it have a theory, a substantive theory of the form that we need? What about foundationalism? Does it do it? Sosa says, well, we have to bolster foundationalism. Here's how we can do that. He offers up his virtue theory account. He claims, look, this does all that work. It gives me a unification of epistemic virtue by this simple property, reliability. It shows how it actually infuses beliefs with justification. Primary justification comes in the form of being a virtue, a sort of process that generates these beliefs. Secondary justification comes from being the product of a virtue, of the process that generates these things. Substantive foundationalism, then, is just a version, or aspires at least to be a version, of grade 3 formal foundationalism. It holds that there are ultimate sources of justification other than relationships among beliefs. Coherentism is likewise a grade 3 formal foundationalism, so long as we can come up with some non-epistemic, non-normative explanation of what it is for beliefs to be coherent. By understanding coherentism as a type of formal foundationalism, he thinks, we can see again why the intellectualist model of justification fails. Why it in turn would cause the failure of the coherentist doxastic assent argument against foundationalism and in favor of its own theory. The central idea behind the doxastic assent argument is that there is reasoning involved in the acceptance or recognition of foundational beliefs as foundational, and this reasoning requires premises that cannot be foundational themselves. And so, were the coherentists to take this view to its logical conclusion, what they would say is, okay, look, we accept this as our central idea, and what that means is that no beliefs can actually be justified because that idea, that justification requires inference, that undermines our very project. We can illustrate this by considering how coherentism relates to the world. And it gives us a clear advantage, he thinks, for substantive foundationalism. Mere coherence among beliefs is insufficient for justification. We can always imagine equally coherent systems, one in which we have a clearly justified belief, the other in which we have a clearly unjustified belief. We might recognize this as a version of the argument that Bonjour mentions as a typical argument brought up against coherence theory. So here we've got Cartman. He's got this system of coherent beliefs. He's got an actual headache, a throbbing pain. He's got a belief. This class is giving me a headache that is coherent with all these other beliefs. Coherent system of beliefs. I got a belief. The belief looks justified. Why? Class is really giving him a headache. Here's Cartman clone. Cartman clone has an equally coherent set of beliefs. They're just slightly different beliefs. And one of the beliefs in this coherent set is this class is not giving me a headache. Equally coherent, but this belief does not look justified. Why? He's got a throbbing pain in his head. Cartman 1's belief looks justified. Why? He has a throbbing pain in his head. The belief he forms is that the class is giving him a headache. The difference between these in terms of coherence, absolutely nothing. They're equally coherent. So he thinks this is what gives the advantage to the formal foundationalists. The coherence theorist cannot specify properties that are capable of realizing justification in beliefs in a way that helps us to see how that's actually supposed to work. Differentiate justified beliefs from non-justified beliefs. The Cartman example is supposed to illustrate that point. Substantive foundationalists, Sosa says, they should be happy but not too happy, since their foundationalism only seems to point to beliefs resulting from various sensory experiences. They go, look here, we got to have basic foundational beliefs. These look like good candidates, stuff from perception, right? So visual stuff, gustatory stuff, tactical stuff, auditory stuff, all those are foundational. You ask them then, well, why? And is it only these? Those seem like perfectly legitimate questions, but as Sosa notes, one legitimately asked why these and only these. The foundationalist just has to accept these as maxims, as brute facts, as unacceptable. So he makes that assertion. We say, yes, but why? Seems like a legitimate question. Why these beliefs and only these beliefs? It just seems like the foundationalist has to accept these as maxims or brute facts. And he thinks that's unacceptable. The foundationalist has to abandon just listing off a set of foundational beliefs or a class of foundational beliefs and seek some deeper unifying principle. Has to aspire towards that higher level of formal foundationalism. And he's got an answer for that. Here's how it would work, he says. Primary justification applies to intellectual virtues, to stable dispositions for belief acquisition. They're virtuous, that is, they are primarily justified because of their greater contribution towards getting us to the truth. Secondary justification. Well, all the beliefs that get generated by these virtues, they get secondary justification. That is, their justification comes through their being generated by these reliable dispositions to form beliefs. It's in virtue of their source in the intellectual virtues that they get their justification. How they got formed and the properties of the processes that form them, that's what gives them their justification. So Sosa says now we can pick out those beliefs by an underlying principle, the principle of epistemic virtue.